Intuitively, we tend to assume that the more variety of products we offer, the higher the chances that our customers will find the one that matches exactly their needs, and therefore the easier it will be to make a sale. But what if I tell you that that assumption may be wrong? In today's video, we'll see a couple of studies that put that into question by looking at the impact that an extensive array of product options can have on the chances that customers make a purchase in a scenario where not buying anything is an option, which is often a possibility in real life. So, regarding the first study, apparently it stemmed from a researcher noticing that although she loved going into a gourmet grocery store that had all kinds of varieties of all kinds of products, she never seemed to buy anything there. So she decided to test the hypothesis that although people were attracted to having a high variety of products available to choose from, that same variety hindered purchase. You can watch her tell the story in her TED Talk that I'll link below. So, she and a fellow researcher conducted a couple of experiments to test that hypothesis, one of which is the now quite famous jam experiment. In case you're not familiar with it, keep watching, and if you are, feel free to jump ahead. I'll put timestamps in the description. The researchers conducted an experiment in which they placed a stand with jams in a store and offered people to try the jams. The jam stand alternated between having 6 or 24 types of jams available to try, all from the same brand, and researchers were trying to understand whether people were attracted to a higher variety of jams, but ended up being demotivated from purchasing due to that same increased variety. During the 2 Saturdays that the experiment lasted, 242 people passed by the 24 jams display, of which 60% stopped to try the jams. And 260 people passed by the 6 jam stand, of which 40% stopped to try the jams. This means that the 24 jams stand was able to attract 50% more people than the 6 jams stand. However, it turns out that the people who approached the 24 jams stand didn't try that many more jams than the ones approaching the 6 jams one. In both cases, people tried either 1 or 2 jams. And when later analyzing which potential customers actually did buy, researchers got to the conclusion that while 30% of the 6 jams customers purchased, only 3% of the 24 jams ones did. That's a huge difference. So, while the larger variety did attract more potential buyers, it also decreased the likelihood of buying. Now, unfortunately, this experiment left a lot of open questions. One was whether people who stopped at each of the stands had different purposes to begin with. That is, the ones approaching the 24 jams might have been driven by curiosity, while those approaching the 6 jams actually wanted to buy jam. Then, it might have happened that those approaching the 6 jam stand were unwillingly led to believe that those jams had been selected to be on the stand because they were more special than the other jams from the same brand. After all, when later picking the jams from the shelves to actually buy them, customers were faced with all 28 jams from the brand and not only the 6 that they had been shown. And finally, it might have happened that those that had to choose among 24 jams thought that they didn't have enough information to decide, especially in light of the small difference in the average number of jams tested. Even in the 24 jam stand, people didn't try more than 2. Probably they felt some kind of social pressure that prevented them from trying all the ones that they would have liked to try. And they didn't want to make a decision with what they felt was incomplete information. Anyway, the researchers conducted 2 more experiments to get a better understanding of how the number of options affected the choice process and choice-related motivation. Now, one of those experiments was the chocolate experiment. In that experiment, subjects were asked to select which chocolate they would buy for themselves. Again, people were divided into groups. In this case, 4 groups. One group was asked to choose among 6 types of chocolate. They were then allowed to try the chocolate that they had selected. Another group was asked to choose among 30 types of chocolate and again allowed to try the chocolate that they had selected. A third group was asked to choose among 6 types of chocolates, just as the first group, but allowed to try a random type of chocolate. It wasn't really random. They were offered the chocolate selected by the people who were allowed to choose. And the fourth group was asked to choose among 30 types of chocolates and, just as in the case of the previous group, was allowed to try an equally random type of chocolate. Participants were then asked several questions regarding how they found the selection process And finally, were given the option to select between two rewards for having participated in the study, either receiving $5 or a box of chocolates from the same brand worth $5. So, what were the results? Regarding time to decide, unsurprisingly, the group selecting among 30 chocolates took a lot longer to make a decision. They also considered that they had been given too many options to choose from. And regarding how well informed they felt when making the decision, all groups considered themselves to be moderately well informed with no significant differences between the groups. Now, when it came to satisfaction regarding the decision process in itself, people in the 30 chocolates groups found making the decision significantly more difficult and more frustrating. And the two were positively correlated. However, these people in the 30 chocolates groups also enjoyed themselves significantly more. And there was no correlation between feeling frustrated or finding the selection process difficult and enjoyment. Go figure. Yeah, it was hard. Yes, I felt frustrated. Loved it. Anyway, moving on to satisfaction with their choice, the results did confirm an expectation. The participants in the 6 chocolates group who selected the chocolate that they could try did feel a significantly higher level of satisfaction when compared to the 30 chocolates group. And groups selecting their chocolates felt more satisfied than both groups that didn't have a say in the chocolates they tried. And what happened in terms of choice of rewards? Meaning, who took the $5 and who preferred a box of chocolates? Well, 48% of the participants in the 6 chocolates group who tried the chocolate that they had selected preferred the box of chocolate. However, just as in the jams experiment, the number was dramatically smaller among the 30 chocolates group who could choose the chocolate to try. In this case, the percentage of participants selecting the box of chocolates went down to 12%. And the same happened among participants who could not choose the chocolate. 90% of them preferred the money. If you want all the details, I suggest taking a look at the studies. References down below. So, this supports the idea that although having more product options is great when customers know exactly what they want, when they don't, there can be such a thing as having too many. It can make the purchasing process overwhelming, leading to purchase delay or even avoidance for fear of making a non-optimal decision. And you might argue that this can be sort of intuitive in the case of high-priced, high-involvement purchases, or in the case of products with some degree of sophistication, in which, if you think of it, it does make sense that having more options can make it more difficult for potential customers to understand which option is the best for them, and which could in turn make them delay or even possibly avoid making a potentially wrong decision. But what people often resist is the idea that having a high variety of products when it comes to low price, low involvement purchases also deters purchase. Most people do not expect a high number of product options to have a negative impact on the purchase of such mundane products such as jam. To be honest, I personally find these results very surprising. I mean, it's just jam. How hard is it to decide? I would also expect that those who couldn't make a decision would buy 2 jars. After all, these people were in a gourmet store in Menlo Park, California. They could probably afford to buy 2 jars of jam if it really was that hard to choose. However, that does not seem to be what happens. The fact was that even in the case of jam, having too many options had a surprisingly negative effect. A famous real-life example of this is the Head & Shoulders shampoo line reduction from 26 to 15 varieties, which resulted in a 10% market share increase. Article linked below. So, the key takeaway here is that although we do want to have some product variety to allow customers to choose and allow us to target different segments or to use marketing strategies such as bundling or product tiers, when the amount of options makes it more difficult for people to identify which option is the best for them, the impact can be negative. Now, one important detail. Another study showed that it does seem that having a higher number of products available within a given product line may have a positive impact on the customer's perception regarding the brand quality. The manufacturer is perceived as more of an expert in the field, leading to a higher likelihood of selecting that particular brand. So, if not buying isn't an option, the brand with a higher number of options available may have an advantage, even if selecting among its options is more difficult. But that's not really what this video is about, so I'll leave the details for another day. Bye!